Sixers win it! Wow!
Oh, man, Embiid just posterized Russell Westbrook. You love the Philadelphia Eagles! Let me get a hell yeah!
What's happening, guys? Welcome to another edition of Party on Broad. It is Dibs, Mr. Crockpot on Twitter. The Party on Broad podcast can be found on iTunes and Spotify. Smash those 5 stars, leave a review. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, guys. On tap for today, we are reacting to Brett Brown's Zoom press conference. We're going to talk a little bit about The Last Dance and how it impacts the Philadelphia 76ers now in the playoffs and moving forward. And we're going to talk a little bit about job status for Brett Brown. Joining us today is my man, our co-host. He is Rob. Follow him on Twitter at Philly_Madness and check out the Madness podcast with Jess Town. What's going on, Rob?
Listen, I just got one question. Is how a team with Scott Rowland can beat the unbelievable group of stars I put together in the second round. It was very frustrating. Like, I played the good guy on Twitter and congratulated JR. No, damn it. I am still upset about that loss, and I plan on taking it out on every team and get back to that rematch. I want that rematch.
So we're running some brackets. We did a giant Philly draft, all the best sports stars in Philadelphia, current and past. And I feel like you and JR are destined to meet each other once more before someone eventually takes down Bryant, right?
Yeah, I hope so at some point.
All right. And also joining us today is my man, Austin. Follow him on Twitter at KrellTPL. Check out the Feed to Embiid podcast. Check them out at the Feed to Embiid on Twitter. What's up, Austin?
Not much. Another Monday out of the way. Got a long weekend coming up. Thank God. Bad news is that it's only Monday. So.
All right. So today we are talking about the Brett Brown Zoom press conference. We're talking my top takes, and we're going to lead this into The Last Dance, how it impacts the Sixers, and moving forward with Brett Brown. So my first take here from this press conference was Joellen Embiid's playing time in the playoffs. Brett Brown said the ideal number of minutes for Embiid in the playoffs would be roughly 38 per game, up from 30 that he averaged during the regular season. Me personally, I immediately go back to Joel Embiid in the playoffs last season, where he was absolutely dominant when he was on the court. In roughly 30 minutes a game, he was a net positive in 3 out of 4 games versus Brooklyn and 6 out of 7 games versus Toronto. In 22 career playoff games, Embiid has only played 38 minutes or more 3 times. Guess what, guys? In those 3 games, he was a plus 19. He saw his shooting percentage dip significantly. He only shot 40% from the floor, but all 3 of those games were losses. My first thought goes to conditioning, an area that Joel Embiid has struggled his entire career. But Rob, assuming the NBA resumes, is 38 minutes a realistic goal for Joel Embiid in the playoffs?
I mean, I look at it it should be, okay? It should be for a guy coming into this point of his career where he's been talking about it now, right? I know I got to be in better shape. That can't happen. I can't have that situation. But with him, I don't know. And I mean, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves because we're going to talk about The Last Dance. But his mentality when it comes to that conditioning has never been that mentality of I'm going to do whatever it takes. He could say it all he wants, but you have to actually go out there and do it. And I think that would be a major goal for this team is to have Joel Embiid on the floor for 38 minutes. The problem is I don't know if his body's going to allow him to do that. And we could say, oh, well, we can make excuses, but I'm done making excuses for anyone on this team, coaches, players, or anything. I would hope that eventually he should be able to do that this year if they resume, especially with this layoff. I just don't see it. He has to show me before I can believe he can do it.
Yeah, I was shocked when I went back into his playoff career. Only three games he played 38 minutes or more, all 3 losses. Austin, is it a good thing to see Embiid at 38 minutes at the jump?
No, it's quite terrible, actually. So if you're playing Embiid 38 minutes a jump, that means 2 things. One is you've marginalized Al Horford to 10 minutes per game, which obviously isn't going to be the case because there's money at stake, there's egos there. So clearly you're going to put him at power forward. We've seen what Al Horford power forward means. and the spacing is horrible. The offense is clunky. They get put in the zone, and it's game over from there. The only way that they can make this work is if you cut Embiid's minutes to like 30 game, preserve him for the crucial moments of the fourth quarter, play him as regular in throughout the rest of the game, but then you also play Al Horford as backup center. The only way this offense works is with one of them on the court at different times, not together. The more you play them together, the more you're going to hurt them in the playoffs. And I don't see a benefit in playing Embiid. Not only do I not see a benefit to Embiid, I don't see it to the overall team success of playing Embiid 38 minutes, because it means that Horford's also probably going to be playing a lot of minutes on the court with him, and that's just counterproductive at this point.
Couldn't agree more, man. My second take here is some lessons learned from The Last Dance, because there was a lot of talk about The Last Dance in this Brett Brown Zoom press conference. Brett reflected on that relatively low maintenance and low drama of that Spurs team compared to that Bulls squad of Jordan and Pippen and Dennis Rodman of the Bulls. But what he circled around on was that competitive spirit. Rob, this is something that we have questioned over and over and over again, whether it was us or whether it was the national media. Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, do you see Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid, for that matter, having that killer mentality, that Mamba mentality, that killer instinct like Michael Jordan or a Scottie Pippen? Do they have that spirit to get them to the next level?
You've seen flashes of it, but you haven't seen it to the point where I say that they have that mentality. Look, no one, and I mean no one, has had Michael Jordan's mentality, and I don't think anyone ever will. I just think that's a lost art. I think today's athlete is a lot softer than the athlete of under year. And you just see that load management wasn't a thing in the 90s. I mean, it just wasn't. I mean, you had egos, and we saw Scottie Pippen's ego pop up a couple times during this. There's no doubt about that. But these two guys have the talent to just take over a basketball game at any time. I think you've seen a killer instinct, as crazy as it's going to sound, in Ben, a little bit more, not from the jump shot area, but like when he has those games where he's going hard to the basket, where he's playing defense in the fourth quarter. But listen, I hope to God, for Sixers fans, for our sake, that those two watch that and see what it takes to win at this level. And I'm not saying they have to be Michael Jordan, because, and Austin, you covered it, that mentality is so crazy. I mean, look, it makes you a psychopath. Like, Michael Jordan's great, but he's a psycho. I mean, he was a straight psycho. Like, thinking of things that pissed him off, like George Karl walking by him in a restaurant set him off for the entire series against the Seattle Supersonics. So if I was, if I had to give a yes or no answer, say no, they don't have it. I don't know how they can get it at this point.
I agree. Like when Brett said, your best player has to grab things by the throat and lead. Man, I just go again and again and again during the times when Ben and Joel have failed at this way more than succeeded. What about you, Austin?
So I would say that I think the killer instinct concept is something that's like kind of ambiguous. Like, how do you define like what it means to have a killer instinct? Like, I think you could say that a handful of players have killer instinct, in that they always come up with a tiny defensive stop on an individual defense. At the tail end of games, some guys always execute plays well. They're excellent playmakers. Some guys just make clutch shots. I think it differs from guy to guy. I will say this. I remember distinctly Ben Simmons as a rookie on the road in a hostile Miami in the playoffs, throwing down 2 dunks in back-to-back games to put games 3 and 4 away against the Heat. We've seen Ben Simmons do some pretty incredible things on the basketball court in the fourth quarter of games before. We've seen Embiid dominate the paint when you needed him the most. I think they have it. I think a whole different part of the argument and part of the skill set is not just making a shot once in a while and maybe being lucky with it, but consistently knowing how to come out on top and pull things out down the stretch. That part remains to be unseen, but I think that they do have the ability to not fold pressure.
Right on, right on. And my last take before we move on to Brett Brown here, because I'm sure we have a lot to say about Brett. But one of my takes here, he said, you're reminded of the people like Michael Jordan and LeBron James and Kevin Durant. They didn't win championships until they were 28. And if I'm wrong by a year with all three of those people. So it does take time. So when you're watching The Last Dance and you're watching this press conference, I'll ask you this, Rob. The Sixers absolutely underachieved this season. There's no argument about that. And I'm as critical as anyone on Brett Brown. But when you look at that quote and what we've seen from The Last Dance, you see the Bulls lose again and again to the Detroit Pistons, man. It was like such an accomplishment to finally beat the Pistons. And then you see the struggles versus Boston during previous seasons, and then Toronto. Joel Embiid is 26. Ben Simmons is 23. Are we as fans putting unfair expectations on Brett Brown as a head coach?
I don't want to single it out to Brett right now. I think as fans, because of living through the process years, this fan base was always going to get to a point where the expectations became quote unquote unfair. And look, I know like winning an NBA championship is not like this easy thing. Like it was never a guarantee that once all the pieces were there, they were just going to go and dominate the East and win. I know that's what we all hoped for. I agree, they have totally underachieved this year, primarily on the road, right? Like it just makes no sense. And perhaps that's a coaching flaw because I don't really know how else that plays in. Look, I've said this time and time again. When it comes to the 76ers, Brett Brown deserves a fair share of the criticism. There's no doubt about it. But I think for some reason we'll bitch and complain about players, but not everybody blames the players as well. And we were all fooled. I don't think the roster construction is great. I know we're going to talk about that probably, here in a few minutes. I don't know if I want to say it's unfair. I just think after living through the process, the fans are tired of waiting. And this is kind of the catch-22 of making your fans live through that when you say it's time, well, then damn it better be time. And if it's not, this is the reactions you're going to get.
What about you, Austin? Are we putting unfair expectations on Brett Brown?
No, and yes. So I'll say this: like they should be better, right? I mean, they should be better than they are. And I think a lot of it, like you can point at Brett Brown and say, "Why are you sticking with this run and gun 3-point shooting philosophy in a third, fourth quarter of a game when you're up 16, 17 points? You should be feeding it to your big men, getting to the line, slowing the game down, getting free looks at the basket." And, because those live ball turnovers are how the opponent gets back into games against them. We see all the time. Now, I think I would like to see a coach try to get more out of a roster constructed like this. I mean, you have a point guard who won't, and I believe doesn't need to shoot. That's a whole different argument for a different time. You have a big man who is turnover prone at times, and you need to keep his block as clear as possible so that way he can operate. And so what do? You surround that with Al Horford, Josh Richardson, and Tobias Harris. One of those guys is shooting above 35% from three this season. You had it figured out when you had Dario Saric, who was shooting 40%, Covington, who was shooting 36, 37, and JJ, who was shooting 42. That was the best team they put on the floor. The team maxed out in the second round, but it was the best team they put on the floor to support their stars, and look what it did. So I do think I think that they've made it very hard for him to do the best job he could possibly do. But I also think that there are areas where I can't help but blame him. I mean, just to be fair, like all the way around. And don't get me wrong, the players are certainly to blame in certain spots, and more than others. But I do think part of it is roster construction, and part of it is that there are times when he could have been better, or games that they've lost because he could have been better, and he should have been better.
And also, it's like you said, when you look at the guys they've surrounded Ben and Joel with this year. Look, I think they expected Tobias Harris to shoot at a better clip than he has. Josh Richardson, I don't know what they thought from a shooting perspective, but really the biggest thing, and you said it earlier, Al Horford. It doesn't fit next to Joel Embiid. Like, they have a $20+ million bench guy right now because he can. Playing him with Embiid is just it doesn't work because they're too crowded. And then what you get is you get Al Horford going out there and jacking 8 threes a game, which, as we've seen, is not a pretty picture either.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the idea was like, okay, what if we can turn him into like a Kevin Love type? Al Horford's never been a prolific three-point shooter or marksman. He's been a 36, 37%er on his best seasons, and that's with a point guard who can run the pick and roll in space and can really open the lanes up for him to feel comfortable shooting the ball. This team would have been a remarkably different team and a remarkably better team if you had like paid Bojan Bogdanovic and like a bunch of, and like Malcolm Brogdon, other guys who are versatile who can shoot the ball from the outside. I get it, obviously. Brogdon and now Bogdanovic are missing time, but those teams, I mean, the roster construction of the team was not only not conducive to success, but it was flat out insulting to Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. I kind of think.
I fully agree. And before we get into Brett Brown, like, I want to touch on that also. And I asked, like, what is the window to win a championship? And was that something that was premature said by the Sixers front office? Because all the messages from the Sixers front office is we are built to win now. It is a championship or bust type of season. And was that inaccurate, man? Because you look at the moves that the Sixers have made, and they are trying to win a championship. Thus, that's what we must grade Brett Brown on. And you know, the Sixers roster is built to win now. And for the most part, the team this season has been lost. Players on the Sixers have obviously voiced their frustration. It's beyond obvious that the players are not listening to Brett Brown like they did in the past. And then we get to X's and O's. The team doesn't have an identity. And we go to the other side, and that is Elton Brand. Has he given him a fair roster, constructively built around Joel and Ben? And that is an absolute no, man, because I keep going back to, well, Brett Brown, should he be fired? Well, Elton Brand deserves at least equal parts of that blame. So let's talk about Brett Brown. Rob, where are you with Brett Brown's current status as head coach?
It's a hard place for me, man, because and Jess will tell you from the madness, I am as strong of a Brett Brown supporter as there is. I think he's a good guy. I do think deep down he can coach. I think he struggles at times with substitution patterns somewhat. I think X's and O's, like Austin said, he hadn't adjusted that, especially in game when they're up by a lot. He continues this run and go type of thing, and it ends up causing them more issues. Look, look, it's easy to say, okay, the season got cut short. We don't know what it would have ended up like. Maybe things would have changed in the playoffs. But if this season does not come back, I don't think you can bring him back from the standpoint of, right, it's a money-making business, and your fan base, for the most part, is not going to accept that. And I get it. I get it. But you said it. I don't think that they set him up for success this year. They knew what style that he coached to. And I even said it after they put the roster together. I even said to somebody, I said, look, they don't have enough shooters around here.
Yep.
And I think that's going to be an issue, even with the talent they're adding. And I'll always say, I think Al Horford was a plan B, almost desperation move once the Jimmy Butler thing fell apart. And I just think that, like, you got.
Yeah, we talk about how there's miscommunication between Brett Brown and the players. The players are clearly voicing they don't know what role they have on this team. Well, it's beyond obvious that Elton Brand and Brett Brown had, this giant miscommunication about how to build a championship roster. They're clearly different ideologies and play style. What about you, Austin? What is your vibe with Brett Brown as head coach moving forward?
I disagree with Rob, actually. I think I think they had Al Horford in place since like February of last year.
Okay.
And I think that the Jimmy Butler thing was never going to work out. I think they knew that pretty early on. And I think that they saw the painting on the wall and they said, okay, well, let's look at this from a different angle. We'll let this play out and we'll see what happens from there. But I mean, I think they made it pretty apparent, like the way that they made decisions this summer. Jimmy wasn't on their future plan list, and they had already gravitated towards Al Horford, and Jimmy said, "Fine, fuck you, I'm out." And said Miami, which I mean, more power to him, I guess. But anyway, so I would say I think it's a bizarre situation with Elton Brand and Brett Brown, because you have one person who is essentially coaching for his job, and his future in Philadelphia is very very uncertain. But he's wanted as an assistant elsewhere, so he knows how to win. And then you have a GM who it's his first time as a GM in the NBA, who never won a championship anywhere. So it's a very awkward dynamic. And I wondered about the miscommunication thing. It's an interesting point. I just think that there's so many variables here that change. I mean, I think Brett Brown is a fine NBA head coach, but I think he's also failed to improve in certain aspects. And I think there have been times when he's been so stubborn and trying to make a point and trying to teach his guys that he's let games go because of it.
Yeah, man. I listen, I love Brett Brown. I've been the biggest Brett Brown supporter until this year. He's so well liked. It's important to mention that this is a player-driven league, man. He's got Joel Embiid in his pocket. Brett Brown is super hardworking. And the Sixers have had a home playoff series in each of the last 3 seasons. So there is that. And judging, where they have come from in such a short time, you got to call it out. That's pretty impressive. But the area that go ahead.
Wasn't the original question how long is the window? I forgot the original question.
The original question is the current status on Brett Brown. Like where are you going?
Never mind. Okay, we're good.
Yeah. So I'm going to get into that. So where I struggle with the Sixers and Brett Brown, and it's been a problem all year long, is team identity. The Sixers have truly been lost when it comes to sticking to a specific style of play, especially when they're on the road, man. They're 17th in offensive efficiency. They're second in the NBA in defensive efficiency at home, but near the bottom of the league when they're on the road. I feel like I've talked about this over and over and over again, but what are the Sixers, man? I know it's unfair to compare the 98 Bulls to this team. That team knew how to win a championship. They had an identity. They were the 3rd best defensive team in the NBA during that run, the 9th best offensively. They had a clear identity on that team. And then you look at Brett Brown's pace and space offense, and the Sixers have just lost it. They're in the middle of the league in 3-point shooting. They're 11th in fast break points. They're 19th best in pace. And the biggest stat that kills me is points off turnovers. The team should be absolutely killing it in this area. They're 20th in the NBA in the league in points off turnovers. That is not acceptable. So that is a team that speaks to me. A team that lacks an identity, and there is clear miscommunication, not only between the general manager and the head coach, but the head coach and the players, man. It's just, how in the world are players supposed to know their role on the team when the general manager and the head coach clearly cannot get on the same page? So I want to preface that. I think Brett Brown should go, and he probably will, but I'm not letting Elton Brand off the hook. Go ahead, Rob.
No, and there's where, listen, you just talked about a miscommunication between the general manager and the head coach, right? We're just talking about the Last Dance. Well, in that 98 season, there was no bigger miscommunication between the head coach than Krause and Phil Jackson. And what did Phil do? Phil turned it into a positive, right? Phil went to his team and said, this is it. This is the Last Dance. This is the time to put it all together and get one more. You want to talk about turmoil in an organization? The friggin' GM came out before the year and said Phil won't come back even if he goes 82-0. I mean, Dennis Rodman's taking off to go be Hulk Hogan's, right-hand man in a wrestling match, and they're still finding ways. There's Now, once again, as we said, we don't expect the players to be like Michael Jordan. You can't expect other coaches to be Phil Jackson. But you have to have demand over a team. And that doesn't mean having to be an asshole all the time. Like, think of Phil with Dennis Rodman. And Dennis said it last night in the season finale. Phil knew sometimes I had to go and just do me. But I would always be there on the floor. There's a way to be a prick of a coach, but also respect your players. I don't think Brett knows how to do that. I think he tries to be too friendly, and that's part of the time period too. That's part of the age of the
Right.
athlete and coach at the same time. But I agree with you guys. And look, I love Brett Brown. I will say this: if by some chance he came back next year, and everybody would be burning down the city of Philadelphia, I would just sit here quietly. I would not be against this because, but I could see why 100% why people would be against it.
And
I will say this. I do think that like the whole like idea that this team wasn't like built to Brett Brown's strengths. I actually dove into this yesterday. I did some research. When they make 10 or more threes in a game, because the whole pace and space idea about Brown's offense, they are 99-54 over the past 3 years. That to me isn't good enough to like say like, oh, this team was he really had it all figured out when he had shooters. Like, no, that's only like a 62% winning percentage compared to overall what they've been, which is 64%. I don't know that I buy into the conceptual nature that Brett Brown's team had. Or the philosophies that he had in store under a well-done roster. Now, I will say this. I think it worked for Phil with the whole discipline aspect of it because you had a killer in Jordan there. And he had guys in that roster who knew how to straighten out Rodman and knew how to lead the team and pick each other up when they needed someone to act right. So Phil didn't have that problem. He also had champions who knew how to win. Brett Brown doesn't have that. He doesn't have a veteran on his team who's won a championship, or he's never had. He's Al Horford never won a championship.
That was supposed to be the veteran that were kind of rein in Ben and Joel, I think.
Well, right, but you still have to have the credential of I've won a championship, and he didn't have that in JJ. He didn't have that. He had that in Marco, I guess you could say. He didn't have that in Jimmy. He didn't have that in Ersan. He's never had a player on his team who's won a title and knew and understood what he was looking at and saying, okay, this is how a championship team plays. This is the standard we have to hold ourselves to. So I think it's a different meal that we're having here. I to me personally, I think there's a time for fun, there's a time for professionalism and work. And if we're going to treat professional athletes like they're workers, like they're employees, because they are, you have to play in the off season and be focused on your job in season. Now, granted, Rodman was the type of guy who could go out and go to the club for 3 days in a row and then come back and have a dominant game in the playoffs. But the Sixers can't do that. It's a different type of era. Different type of players.
Yeah, and I guess my point there was more so, and you hit the nail on the head. They had guys to lead from the players' perspective, and we don't know the Sixers don't. I mean, they have quote unquote like Al Horford was seen as a leader, right? Like obviously not a championship pedigree, but a leader.
But he was great in the playoffs. Al Horford was phenomenal in the playoffs.
Yeah, but he doesn't have a championship. He never won one.
Right. But he was one of the first guys this season to kind of speak out like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, and talking to a Boston reporter or whatever it is. I mean, look, Michael Jordan could be pissed at the world, but he never, he bashed his players and talked to his coaches to their face. He got in a fist fight with Steve Kerr in a practice. No one knew about that.
And they came out better teammates because of it.
Yeah, exactly. Now, there was no Twitter and things where everything was seen and broadcasted to the world, but you're right. They had guys that it was tough love, but I feel like that, first of all, I don't feel like Brett wants to, which is a problem. And secondly, I don't feel like these players would respond to it, which is another problem that they have.
And that's the next question I want to ask you with this, Austin, because this is important. is what is the fallout of Brett Brown leaving? Is there any fallout of Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons souring on the Sixers moving forward? And do you foresee a tough love coach coming in and getting in the face of Ben Simmons and telling him to shoot? Go ahead, Austin, because I know you have a take on this.
So I'll say that I think there will be fallout with Joel at first. I think Joel's as tough of a player as he is and as much of a jokester as he is. I think he's very emotionally tied to Brett Brown. I think he's an emotional man. So I think that he'll feel slighted by a dismissal of Brett Brown. I think Ben would to an extent, but I also think that Ben sort of said it himself when he completely just stopped shooting jumpers after Brett Brown challenged him. He doesn't really care. I think they would both care a little more because that's their training wheel is gone. That's their security blanket, their Kevlar gone. Someone's going to come in here who, by the way, the next person they hire, they're trying to sell this team. The owners want to sell this team. They're going to bring in somebody who they think can maximize the value of their players, and therefore maximize the market value of their franchise. So the next guy that comes in here is going to have a history and is going to have a reputation and a resume of success. And he's not going to care what Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid thinks. He's going to do it how he thinks is going to be the way to win championships. So they're not going to love that. They're not going to love it when someone comes out and is calling them out and is challenging them like that, and I guess sometimes embarrassing them. Now, I don't think you can run a team that way, catering to what the players want and need. But I do think you have to worry about with the timeline of Joel Embiid's contract. I think if you do this the wrong way and you don't consult him about this, you make him feel like you don't give a shit about him, or you don't make him feel like he's part of the process. I think you could easily reduce your championship window, because he might say, all right, well, I'm going to go team up with my buddy Jimmy Butler in Miami and go where I want to go, or go somewhere else. And then if that's the case, you lose him on the open market, and you're in a very big hole there. So I think you have to do it. I think you have to do it the right way if you're going to do it. But I think it's also a Band-Aid that has to be ripped.
Go ahead, Rob.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you if say we come back next year, Austin, and Brett Brown's still the coach, they don't get rid of him, right? Do you look at that and say this is Elton Brand catering to Ben Joe and saying, hey, I know this is your guy. We don't want to piss you off. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just curious your take. If Brett Brown is back, is it primarily because Ben and Joe want him here?
If Brett Brown is back, I think this is how it's going to play out this offseason. I think either Brown will be back or Horford will be back. One of those two won't be here. And I'm not saying it's because they don't get along. I'm saying because it'll be the easiest way for the team to say, okay, we made a major difference and we made a major change this offseason. And so I think if Brown is not back, that'll constitute as their big move. They'll have fired a coach and got a new coach in. You'll still see Horford here, and that might rub Joel the wrong way. I'm sure Joel would prefer to have Brown here and Horford gone. But it's an interesting perspective. I think it's a players' league, and the players defer. The players want the coach back. So be it. I mean, that's why Brett Brown was back this year. He was as good as gone last year. And Joel said, no, he's back. And that was all they needed to know. So I think it's like this year this was the last chance. You were 39-26. That's not good enough. So, and it might be that Joel thinks like, okay, it's time to man up. I'm tired of second round exits. I'm tired of being misused. I'm tired of taking threes. I'm tired of this, tired of that. I want somebody who I might not be comfortable with, but I think can win me a title. So maybe he's okay with it. But I do think if you bring Brett Brown back at this point, it's about the players issuing a mandate.
Yeah, and I know it's what makes Ben Simmons so good is that he's an arrogant SOB. This guy is terribly arrogant on the court, off the court. And do you see another head coach getting up in Ben Simmons' face and saying, "You need to shoot the ball, or I'm going to take you off the court"? And how do you see that potentially going? What about you, Rob?
I don't see it really making a difference to Ben because I think Ben is who Ben is. Ben is going to make the decision when he's going to shoot jumpers and when he's not. And I tend to agree with Austin. I think that we hype on this a little bit too much. I'm not, like when I say, okay, it'd be nice to see Ben shoot, I just mean like shoot, some mid-range jumpers here. I don't need him shooting 15 jump shots a game or anything like that. Ben's at his best when he's downhill. I mean, we all know that. No one, when Ben gets the ball and is going downhill, you cannot stop him. So I don't think it matters. And I've kind of made this point before when people say Brett's not hard enough on Ben. I said, well, that may be, but I don't know if having a hard ass on Ben is going to change anything either. I think that's going to have to be a Ben decision. But maybe what can happen is another coach can say to Ben, listen, I want you to do this more. Forget about the shooting. Let's just keep working at this, making this better. And maybe another voice is what is needed at this point after 5-6 years of hearing the same voice.
Yeah, I just find it difficult to believe that if Brett Brown can't reach Ben Simmons on an emotional, personal level, like what coach is going to be able to kind of flip that switch inside Ben Simmons and just start to become aggressive 100% of the time, take that mid-range shot? I agree, Rob. I'm not looking for three-pointer after three-pointer. I'm just looking for him to attack the rim relentlessly. What about you, Austin? Is there a world where Ben Simmons and a head coach kind of like get this like bond where he convinces Ben to shoot?
No, absolutely not.
I
don't think it's about the coach at all. I think we've created this pressure on Brett Brown to somehow like magically get Ben Simmons to shoot the ball because we think that's what's holding the Sixers back. When in reality, you probably don't want him shooting the ball. In all honesty, like the true value of Ben Simmons taking jump shots cannot be anywhere near as valuable as him getting to the rim and finishing where he's comfortable. Yep. There's just no value to that. And so you might think he's a more complete player by having a jump shot, but he is the kind of player he won't take it until he's comfortable doing it. He said it himself. It's about putting the reps in and the practice. And maybe when he feels the utility value of having a jump shot, then maybe he'll add one. But I mean, he's made a couple threes this season. Maybe next week he'll make 3 of them. But I don't think he's going to add it until he thinks it's time to add it. Listen, he's had Brett Brown in his ear. He's had his father in his ear, his brother, Rich Paul, LeBron James. Those are all people who he looks to for advice. And if he still won't do it, you can try to find me the next person you think he will get it. And if he does, hallelujah. It's not going to come from a coach, especially one that Ben Simmons has no experience with, has no reason to trust, has no reason to respect.
Yes.
So the shooting part is a completely different situation. And let's not like conflate a coach's ability to coach with whether or not we think Ben Simmons will shoot jumpers under him. That's not why you choose a coach. The next coach has to understand how to mingle these pieces together and gel them and make the color look decent. Not like brown and orange.
Go ahead, Rob.
I wanted to ask Austin, because he said this earlier, in the case that if Brett's back, then Al Horford gets moved. How do they move him? How can you move that deal? Like, is it a matter of you're going to have to just pay a lot of that salary? Like, what are they going to have to do to get him out of here if that's the direction they decide to go?
So, like, I think you're looking at a situation where, like, there's a team maybe out west or maybe a team that feels like, okay, we can better use Horford than what the Sixers had him use that this year. Keep in mind, a lot of it was catch and shoot threes with not a lot of spacing, uncomfortable territory for Al Horford. A lot of it was like misusage, with the Sixers. And then eventually you're missing enough shots, you're not playing well at all. Even if you're a 5-time All-Star, a very highly regarded NBA player, as a human, you're going to lose confidence, and then the other areas of your game are going to falter as well. We saw Horford play better as center against the Clippers. He was tremendous. When Embiid and Ben were down after the All-Star break, he was pretty good for those couple games. So I think there are teams out west who would have interest in him. Now, do you have do they have the pieces in return that you want? Maybe. I think at this point, you're taking whatever you can get off the contract. At this point, it's about opening up that money in 1-2 years, and then really figuring out how to correctly build this thing around Joel Embiid. I will say this: I don't think that the Hield idea is like BS. I think there's real smoke to that. I do.
It would be pretty hilarious. I put like dozens and dozens upon dozens of hours into this NBA draft and top Sixers draft picks, only to see them trade that first pick with Al Horford to another team. All right.
If you get Buddy Hield out of this, that would be the save all. That would be the save all. You'd be saved. You'd be forget it. It'd be done.
I wanted Buddy Hield the year he was coming out, and I knew that it wasn't going to happen. But like, I loved Buddy Hield. Like, I love the way that he played the game. And my God, that you want to talk about getting me back excited for next season?
Yeah.
Put Buddy Hield in a Sixers uniform. That'll do it.
He's consistent. He's a consistent three-point shooter. I looked at his splits. It's 40%, 40%, 40%. How often, as a Sixers fan, do you see guys, Tobias Harris, Furkan, you name it, like guys that shoot 30 or less % from three for consecutive months? Like, this doesn't happen with Buddy Hield. I would love that. We'll wrap it up. Last question, Rob, is Brett Brown, if the NBA is canceled tomorrow, is Brett Brown back next season?
No, I think this is it. I think they move on. I don't know if they pick an NBA guy, they try and go to the college ranks, but I think Brett is gone.
What about you, Austin?
Oh, yeah. No, I think they wanted to find a reason to get rid of him for a while. I think if it ended today, he would definitely be gone.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think the writing's on the wall. Brett Brown will probably be fired, and the Sixers will move on.
I will say this. I think one aspect that we didn't really touch upon at all is the message that ownership sends down to Joel Embiid and Tobias Harris and Ben Simmons. Like, the fact that you get your shit kicked in Indiana or Miami the day after the Super Bowl, and then pictures come out of Tobias and Ben and Joel hanging out with Michael Rubin and Josh Harris at the Super Bowl, minus Brett Brown. What is the message there? Right. The message is you can lose by 25 plus in back-to-back games, and then it's okay. You don't have to listen to your coach anymore. You don't have to feel the pressure. You can come with me to the Super Bowl. The message that the ownership sends down to the players is that you don't have to listen to this coach. And why is that? It's because we don't think he's part of our future. So, I mean, what are we doing here? What is the point of this? Why are you putting this coach through that? The message. Brett Brown has been as good as dead for a while because of the roster construction, the pieces he's been given, the lack of support he's gotten from above, and the messages that this ownership delivers to the players. The players are not employees like they should be. They are friends of the owners who aren't required to listen to their boss. Well
said. Any final thoughts, Rob?
No, I think it's unfortunate. And you, like I said earlier to you, Chris, I wanted Brett to succeed because of everything he dealt through to get here. But at the same time, a new voice is definitely needed, especially if you're going to keep the current roster, because I don't think that Brett can handle. I am concerned about the mentalities of Joel and Ben.
Yeah.
In the case of Brett being fired, I know that Ben's a little bit more not care about things, but there were some rumors out there that one of the reasons Ben was trying to rush back was because he wanted to help Brett. He didn't want to see Brett get fired on account of him not playing. Yeah. So, it'll be interesting to see how they respond. And I think the next coaching hire, you damn well better hit it right on the head.
And it's one of those things. Oh, go ahead, Austin.
I also think, like, realistically, with the way that the NBA works in the landscape, your window isn't like the 10 years that you thought the process was going to lead. This is 2 or 3 more years before you have a free agent on the market who can be swayed by anybody and might say, I'm tired of this shit. I'm tired of signing centers to play power forward next to me. I'm tired of a point guard who won't shoot the ball. I'm tired of I'm tired of them not getting me shooters. I want an organization that supports the players. It took them a week to fire Colangelo after he was sending out tweets about I would kick Joel's ass or something like that from a ladder. Embiid has not gotten the organizational support that he deserves. So when this comes to an end, I mean, we're looking at, you need to win one the next 2 or 3 years to keep your stars satisfied and hungry, or else they don't have any reason to want to be here. Why should they want to sit here through this shit?
And lastly, miscommunication has kind of killed the Sixers over the last several years, whether it's the head coach and the general manager, whether it's the medical staff to the fans before a game starts with Embiid and Ben. It goes on and on and on. And you see Brett Brown just killed over and over and over again on social media. I'm just saying, I agree Brett Brown is probably gone, but be careful what you wish for, because like you said, Austin, there better be a clear message sent from the ownership to Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, because like you, Rob, I'm terribly afraid of that fallout. All right, make sure you check out my man Austin. He is Austin Krell. He is Krell TPL on Twitter. Check out the Feed to Embiid at the Feed to Embiid on Twitter. Covers Sixers and the NBA. And check out my man Rob on Twitter at Philly_Madness. Check out the Madness podcast with Jess Town. All right. Thanks for watching, guys. Stay awesome.
Sixers win it! Wow! Oh man, Embiid just posterized Russell Westbrook. You love the Philadelphia